Marketing for the Skeleton Crew show is now beginning to ramp up with the show now on the horizon.
A real adventure, no more pretend.
However, one of the biggest questions fans have right now is, how does it connect to everything else?
I think it's a lost Jedi temple.
So jump into your starfighters and strap in as we dive into everything worth knowing about the show so far, whilst we'll also get into some early theories for good measure, including its mysterious ties to Ahsoka.
You're a Jedi.
Before we jump in, don't forget to leave a thumbs up on today's video if you enjoy it, and make sure to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to catch more. Now, with all that out of the way, let's unravel the mysteries of Skeleton Crew. Now, in case you didn't already know, Skeleton Crew is set within the same part of the Star Wars timeline as The Mandalorian, which means it also sits alongside the Book of Boba Fett and Ahsoka. At this stage, we don't know whether the new show comes after The Mandalorian Season 3, or if it's set further back between Seasons 1 and 2, for example, but it's fair to assume at this stage that it takes place after Moff Gideon was defeated on Mandalore. And I've got a few theories on why it's been put in around the time of The Mandalorian, which we'll get into later. Anyways, going into the show, we know the Empire's been defeated, for the most part at least. We've still got the Imperial remnants kicking around in the shadows, and they're still for the most part connected with one another through an underground network called the Shadow Council, which was introduced in the last season of Mando, and up until now they haven't been doing all that much. They've pretty much just been waiting for the return of Grand Admiral Thrawn to lead them into a war with the New Republic. So in an upcoming TV show or movie, we can expect to see that begin to play out, as we saw Thrawn make his long-awaited return at the end of Ahsoka. So really, depending on who you ask, the galaxy right now is arguably a more lawless place than during the time of the Empire. They haven't got the resources to properly maintain order and protect it, which feeds into why Din Djarin's now working for him on a case-by-case basis.
You want to work for the New Republic.
But in the years leading up to the shows, we haven't just got the vacuum left behind by the downfall of the Empire. The underground game has also lost a number of key players too, such as Jabba the Hutt and even Maul, which is why you see things like crime syndicates trying to take liberties running spice through territories they wouldn't have before, and the pirate nation openly attacking Navarro. And it's this vacuum, it seems, that's setting up the events of the Skeleton Crew show. Now, in terms of the actual story, they've remained pretty tight-lipped on that for now at least, and I think there's actually a good reason for it. Right now, it's very much being sold to us as this 80s style, coming-of-age, Amblin-style show where it's following a group of kids that become lost in space. Think of the Goonies, but just in space, and somewhere along the line, they run into a Force user named Jude Law, who's apparently a Jedi played by Jude Law. Now, for me at least, there needs to be a bit more to it than that, and one of the questions I want answered is, how did they become lost in space? What was it they were searching for that forced them to venture outside the boundaries of their home planet, away from safety and into harm's way? They're obviously searching for something to begin with, which led them to coming across the Lost Jedi Temple.
I think it's a lost Jedi temple.
So what or who are they looking for? Given it's a show that seems to heavily feature pirates, you'd be inclined to think it's some kind of treasure, but the question then becomes, what does this treasure offer? Is it something of high value, or does it bring them a certain type of power? Now, arguably, one of the most mysterious elements of the show going into it is Jude Law's character, Jude Law, supposedly a Jedi. Now, we've seen the kids pose the question to him directly in a trailer, after witnessing him use the Force to levitate a key. However, it seems there's much more to him than we're led to believe. He's being called by the showrunners a different kind of Jedi, and whilst that's pretty vague and could imply a multitude of things, given what we know about the show already, there are some possibilities that are more likely than others. With the show looking like it's going to have a large pirate presence, we can't rule out the possibility that he's a former Padawan who, after Order 66, decided or fell into the life of piracy as a way to survive. Kind of like the path Balin took after the fall of the Order. However, he went down the path of being a mercenary for hire.
And well paid for it.
It's also worth noting, Jude Law is said to only be one of the names he goes by, so this could actually be an alias to cover up his true identity as a character we've already heard of before, even in canon or from legends. This guy doesn't seem to have a lightsaber either, if Star Wars' upcoming toy range is anything to go by, so that could be a part of his story we see in the show. Perhaps he's looking for the components to create a new one. And now I'm going to put forward a pretty controversial theory I've seen doing the rounds for this guy. You know, we've got to cover all possibilities here, and that would be, given Jude Law's age in real life, if it turns out to be around the same as his characters in the show, then like I mentioned, it would make him pretty young still during Order 66, which would also line him up to be a similar age of Rey's dad Dathon. Now, I'm not saying he's Dathon in disguise, as we know he didn't wield the Force. That's why Palpatine pretty much discarded him in the first place. However, However, there's the theory going around that Jude could be one of Palpatine's Strandcast clones, not like a standard clone that would be identical to Palpatine, but one that's meshed up with other DNAs, which would explain his different appearance. A little bit like Snoke, I guess. Hey, we've already seen Palpatine return before, so perhaps he's at it again now.
Unnatural.
Now, I don't think, personally, that he's going to turn out to be a Palpatine clone or a Strandcast, but it certainly can't be ruled out at this moment. And I actually think it would be pretty cool instead to see him be a dark side Force user separate from the Sith altogether, actually turn into the light side and attempting to learn the ways of the Jedi later on in life. And perhaps that's why his lightsabers remained hidden up until now, because the colour of this blade, if revealed, would give away far too much. Now, one of the biggest draws of the show arguably is its sole connections to the biggest Star Wars Disney Plus show to date, The Mandalorian. We already know, thanks to the trailer, that Vane,
You won't get away this time.
one of the pirates on Navarro in The Mandalorian Season 3, will be appearing alongside some others. And although nothing's been said regarding just how the stories of The Mandalorian and Skeleton Crew connect, or even cross over, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are involved as executive producers, which tells me it all connects in some way, as they weren't directly involved in the other shows like The Acolyte, Andor, or Obi-Wan Kenobi. And besides, if this show ends up not being connected, then why even put it in that part of the timeline to begin with? If it's purely a story about a group of kids becoming lost in space, and nothing really more to it than that, then it could take place at any given time. So yeah, I think it's going to match up with the other shows around it, and even potentially partially setting up the events of the upcoming movies, particularly the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, with it being way more significant than it's appearing to be on the surface right now. And if there's one character's appearance that would signify its connection more than any others, it would be Carson Teva, the New Republic pilot who's been involved in every show so far in this part of the timeline, The Mandalorian, Boba Fett, and Ahsoka. So far, he's the one character we've seen on screen pulling it all together. Now, speaking of returning characters, a bit of a wild card out there would actually be Luke Skywalker. You see, if Jude's a Force user, whether he turns out to be light or dark side, it'd almost certainly be an interest to Luke either way. And if we want to take things back a little further with characters that could appear, one of the cute, cuddly guys from the Forest Moon of Endor, not an Ewok, but a character from the species called Teak, has recently been confirmed to appear. And what this also means is that we could finally be returning to the Forest Moon for the first time in live action since 1983's Return of the Jedi. Because although the Teak species are not believed to originally be from the Forest Moon of Endor, the Teaks inhabited the moon in around 800 BBY, and as of right now, it's the only known place to find them in the galaxy, so there's a pretty good chance any we see in the show could be on, or at the very least from, Endor itself. When we look at the Star Wars worlds we're introduced to in the first 6 movies, we've spent some time on pretty much all of them in recent years, like Mustafar in Episode 9 and in the Kenobi show, but none more so than Tatooine, which has appeared in the sequels, Mando, Boba, and Obi-Wan. But we've never been back to the Forest Moon of Endor, and with the new show looking to be pulling from that 80s vibe, bringing us back to locations from the original trilogy would be one of the best ways to do that. After all, 2/3 of the original trilogy was released in the 80s, which could be considered the golden age of Star Wars storytelling. And now, one of the most interesting elements of the Skeleton Crew show so far, taking into account its ties with everything else around it, actually comes from a batch of recently released images from Empire magazine, one of which shows Jude observing some carvings on what looks to be like the wall of some type of cavern. Now, these are actually a bit more than just some scratches on the wall. It turns out they're inscriptions written in the runic language of the Sith, which we've also seen before on Peridia in the Ahsoka show. She travelled to a faraway galaxy in an attempt to stop Grand Admiral Thrawn's return. However, in the process of doing so, also unravelled the potential of an intergalactic empire that even predates the Jedi Order that used the same language.
What?
No idea.
So the Skeleton Crew show could actually be in a way building upon or even continuing the story told within Ahsoka, particularly regarding this ancient empire. So yeah, although the show right now isn't being sold as a story connected to the Mandalorian and the shows around it, there's definitely so much more to it than meets the eye. You've got another potential Order 66 survivor being revealed, however this time they've taken to a life of piracy rather than continuing with their beliefs of old or becoming a mercenary. But then again, they could also hail from the dark side, but in more recent years they could be looking to follow the ways of the Jedi more closely. And then you've got the whole idea of the pirates playing a large part in it too, which also ties us into the Mandalorian, whilst also showing us the power vacuum that's been left behind not just by the Empire, but also by the crime lords that in their own ways would have kept their individual territories free of pirates. But the idea of the show actually continuing the stories set up in Ahsoka, rather than just throwing in some characters we've seen before, is for me easily the most exciting part, with Mando, Boba and Ahsoka all paving the way to what's going to happen in the movies, particularly the Mandalorian and Grogu. Getting to a bit more of that this year with Skeleton Crew is certainly a surprise, but a welcome one. But do you think Skeleton Crew connecting to the Mandalorian and Ahsoka would be the right move, or should it be entirely on its own? As always, drop your thoughts theories and wilder speculations down in the comments below. Don't forget to leave a like on the video if you've enjoyed it, and remember to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to catch more. I'll see you in the next one. May the Force be with you.